Hello, everyone, and welcome to this evening's Vanderbilt Divinity School webinar. My name is Laura Martico Heifetz. I use pronouns she, her, and hers, and I am the Assistant Dean of Admissions, Vocation, and Stewardship. I am delighted to introduce my colleague, Angela Dillon. This is Angela. She is the admissions counselor, and she will be the lead voice this evening. So thanks so much for being here, Angela. You want to tell us a little bit about you?
Good evening. My name is Angela Dillon. I am the senior admissions counselor here at Vanderbilt Divinity School. I also have two dogs who you may see running around at points tonight, and I have no control over that. So we're just going to run with that and go with that and hope it's great. We also are just going to cover some basics and then answer your questions around what it means to be doing graduate theological education at this time. So let's go ahead and get started. So this is just about how to minimize your debt and while you are at Vanderbilt Divinity School. And so we are going to just talk through this one step at a time. All right, next slide. So as we can see that the cost of debt is rising in relative relation to the actual average of, excuse me, I'm going to turn this over to Laura while I handle my dogs.
That is fine. My dogs are currently quiet. So as we all know, these are such helpful dogs, all of them, that the average cost of tuition has risen higher than inflation. So educational inflation is real. That's something that we're really aware of. So the idea behind holding this webinar is to be really upfront about the costs of attending Divinity School. So whether or not you come to Vanderbilt Divinity School, we definitely want you to come here. We think it's a great place. But if you end up going elsewhere, we still want you to have what you need to be equipped to make sure that you're in a really good shape for both Divinity School and what comes after.
Thank you. So an annual recommended income levels for a standard repayment plan. So as you can see, if you take out, say $10,000 in loans, the recommended income level is $17,000 a year. And incrementally, we take the steps up. The more we borrow, it is sort of necessary that we make more to be able to pay that back. And we know that sometimes that is not a possibility in the kinds of work that folks who graduate from Divinity School typically go into. We will see that what we do know is that current students in today's day and time are more saddled with debt, educational debt, as well as credit card debt than any other prior generation. And it's affecting how we live and how they get to live their lives. So more college graduates tend to live at home with their parents. More college graduates are putting off getting married, starting families, buying homes, just basic things that folks want to do. More college graduates are burdened with educational debt, and this prohibits that. Some individuals are even leaving jobs that they might identify as true callings for jobs and professions that pay more just because of educational debt. And so statistically, students who borrow more heavily in undergraduate degrees will also borrow more in graduate education, and this compounds whatever problems folks have when they graduate and move out into vocations or jobs. So it is all building up, as you can see, for this conversation. Okay, so how much educational debt is okay? The rule of thumb is for borrowing, however much you borrow is what you need to start making on average per year. So if you borrow $30,000 to do your degree, you need to graduate and make a minimum of $30,000. If you graduate with $50,000 of debt, you need to go into a job making $50,000 a year. So what we don't want to do is tamp down the excitement over graduate theological education. What we're encouraging folks to do is to make sure that they're making wise decisions with debt, with educational loans, as they go into this kind of education, knowing that that you want to be smart with your money moving forward. So there is hope. You don't have to take out a bunch of loans. Doing work on the front end, creating a wise plan can change the trajectory of your indebtedness. And so, for example, you can know that there is a payment plan option. And as soon as you know that coming to Vanderbilt is what you want to do, we can help you connect with student accounts and make that happen. The facts are that each student's financial situation is unique and different. Each of you have access through the federal government, those of you who are U.S. citizens, to $120,000 in student loans. And so we don't want you to take out that much money. It's not practical. It is not helpful in the long run for anybody to have that much debt very often. I know some doctors, some other cases that may be the case, but we want to encourage folks to make wise stewardship decisions that are in a connection with both your theology and future plans. So here are points of success. We started what was known as the ECFFM grant, the Economic Challenges Facing Future Ministers grant, with other divinity schools and seminaries across the country in 2014. And at that time, we had 38% non-borrowers in the divinity school. And by the time we concluded that grant this past academic year, we were up to 59, nearly 60% of non-borrowers. So our success rates, really putting our energy into thinking through these wise decisions, have gone up. And you can see over the year how it continues. First-year students, as we've done this work to encourage them not to take out loans. So there are positive possibilities. So let's get creative about how we can make this happen and cut cost living expenses. Nobody wants to have that discussion. It's not fun, but it's for a short period of time. So there are ways to cut living expense costs. So for many, the cost of living is obviously the most expensive things. You can get creative with that. Can you be a resident advisor? Were you in one of the dorms at Vanderbilt, or at in one of the fraternity or sorority houses? Can you live with local family or friends? Can you share an apartment or a house with a roommate? For transportation, Metro Nashville is getting better about their busing and Metro Transit possibilities all the time. So do you need a car? Do you need to pay for parking? If you decide to have a car, do you need to, there are ways there. And you can always make other decisions with groceries, cable and internet, sharing, splitting expenses, cutting down on your monthly debt in bills is a way to do that. Another way to do this is to hit pause on things like vacations, new cars. Nashville's starting to be known as a foodie destination. Chill out on the trendy restaurants. Instead of gifts for family and friends for birthdays or anniversaries or even Christmas, maybe go on an adventure or spend time together. Maybe instead of going out on expensive dates while you're in Divinity school, try picnics and make your food. Even giving to nonprofits or churches can be paused for a little bit. I think God understands if we need to pause to be able to live into the work and calling and vocation that has been placed on our lives. So it's something to just consider. There are multiple ways if you do decide to take out loans that you can take out loans. There is this and then pay them back. There is the standard repayment plan, which is over 10 years. There's a graduated repayment plan, which is partially based on income, where the more that you make, that's the goal. Like once you've graduated, that you get raises or things like that in a position, that then the payment would increase. There is the extended repayment plan, which makes it even longer than 10 years. There's the income-based payment plan, and then the public service loan forgiveness, which, as we all know, has been in the news in many ways, and they're still working out how that's going to work out. So hopefully in the near future, we'll be getting more information about that. But that is if you work in a nonprofit setting, that then for 10 years, then your student loans would be forgiven. So that is an option to keep an eye on as you move forward. Golden tips for student loans. You do not have to take out the entire amount that you are offered in federal loans. If you know that you only need $2,000 to cover the rest of your student bill, you only have to ask. You only need to tell our financial aid office, I only want $2,000. You can ask for the amount that you require, and then you can decline the rest. Or if you don't want any at all for a particular semester, you can decline it entirely. We encourage folks to estimate conservatively for what you will need. Estimate based on books, give a fair estimation, but don't exaggerate what you will actually need. You can always go back and ask for more mid-semester if something comes up and you need more. If for some reason a particular book was more expensive than you anticipated, you can always go back and ask for more. The rule of thumb for most of humanity is if it's in your bank account, you're more likely to spend it. And so if you don't take it all out, you don't access it, then you won't have to worry about having to pay it back in the future. And so one of the things that we want folks to do as they are planning for finances is to take vocational discernment seriously. And by that, we mean don't think of VDS and a graduate degree as putting off the real world. I know we have folks who are represented with different degree programs and different walks of life and different stages of life, but you're here to actually do real vocational discernment in preparation of entering, the real world, if you will. And so make sure that that's what you're doing while you're here, is really thinking those things through so that you have a good understanding of what it is you want to do, what that will look like when you leave Vanderbilt. You should be able to articulate what job you hope to attain after earning your particular graduate degree. This can change. You might not be certain of the exact path, but you might understand like the kind of work you need to be able to have that time while you're here to think those things through, to talk those things through, and to make sense of it. But this is the time sort of to take that seriously. Have conversations with people who are in either the kinds of careers, if you're discerning between multiple options, to find out like what are starting salaries in this kind of work, or what will I top out at if I do this kind of work over the next 20 years of my life, or 15 years, or 10 years? What does this look like as a possibility? And that can also be something that affects the way you borrow, that causes you to think twice about how much you actually take out, not only in loans, but also any other kind of debt. How quickly you're willing to buy a new car, how quickly you're willing to use a credit card. So, and just remember, like, just because you love a subject, it's not a sufficient reason to take on more debt. I love to talk about God. I love to study theology. I love to study the history of religions and all those sorts of things. But it's probably not a good idea just to take on debt to study something like that. Next slide. So here's what your VDS degree will, might lead you into. Our graduates from 2019, 2020 class was pretty evenly split in a lot of ways between congregational ministry, chaplaincy, nonprofit. Other could be, remember, this is in the middle of a global pandemic when these numbers were taken. So other could be a for-profit company. It could be care for family. It could be any number of things. And so these are the things that our graduates were going into. And there are other things to keep in mind that I just want to sort of think about as we move on, is just remember that there are a lot of different factors that go in. Life will not stop once you become a divinity school student. So as you're making decisions about places to go, if we could go to the next slide, places to go to school and things like that, there will be structural realities that do not mean that it's all your fault as to how much access to funding, or maybe funding that you need. It could be the city you go into, that you're a woman, that you're a minority, that you of any kind. There are structural realities in place in our world that we want to acknowledge, that mean the kinds of money that we have access to and the kinds of work that we will be doing are just not prioritized. And then who we are as those people doing that work may not be prioritized. So we know that there are lots of factors that go into the amount of student loan debt that we take on, but we want to make sure that as we make these decisions, we are mindful and making good choices about the opportunities that lie ahead of us. So at this time, I will turn things back over to our Assistant Dean of Admissions.
We will both be on this, and we'll also be asking Courtney Bowden, who is the admissions fellow, to be joining us on this end. So she'll be showing up. We do want to let you all know, so those of you who registered ahead, you have in your possession a worksheet. So we'll talk a little bit about that worksheet. I realize there are a couple of other things to name as well in talking about thinking about how you're planning for divinity school, is that students also, for the vast majority of students, hey Courtney, something like over 90% of current students also work. And so that is something that is very doable, and very common. So you can also think about, as we work through this worksheet, I'll talk about it in just a bit, to consider how much you might be able to bring in through a part-time job. There are some folks who go full-time, or who go full-time and work full-time as well, although I would say that's much more rare, just given the nature of the coursework. So I will also say that, what I'm talking about in terms of students working and all of that, this is primarily about the master's level programs. So I know that we also have interest in this content from a Doctor of Ministry prospective student. Doctor of Ministry students, the vast majority of them, I would say all of them actually, work full time. And they do the Doctor of Ministry alongside their full-time work because it's their full-time work that qualifies them for the Doctor of Ministry program and integrative chaplaincy. So a lot of these discussions are going to feel a little bit more pertinent to the master's level students, especially the full-time master's level students, but hopefully will be helpful for everyone. So I am going to give you a little pro tip, and I'm going to share my screen. And definitely, as we're talking through this, you should feel free to think about any questions you might have. Please put them into the chat so that we can see them and we can address them. And I am going to find this document. All right. So this is the MDiv MTS estimated cost of attendance for this coming year. And you would have received some version of this in your email with this part blank. So if you have already been accepted and you know what your merit award is, that's where you would put in the percentage for the merit tuition. So if it's a 50% merit award, then you would put 50% in there. And then that shows you how much you're responsible for. The fees that are set are the $100. You pay that once. So that's a one-time fee. Annual fees are the student health fee and the student services fee. And then what is here under indirect. So these are your other costs for you to put in yourself based on what you know. So this is what the university has estimated will be some of your costs for books and supplies, for housing costs, rent and utilities, for what you would spend on food, what you would spend on personal needs, including health insurance, transportation, and then potential loan fees. So here is where you can use this worksheet for your own kind of messing around to figure out what you think your budget could be for the coming year, especially if you live locally and you already actually know what some of these costs are. And then you'll know the total for the amount for which you would be responsible. And then you can subtract from that as you plan anything that any other income you would have. So income you would have from work, income you would have from external grants and awards and scholarships. So that is how you would use that worksheet. We do hope that you will be asking the other places you are looking at, if you're looking at other places for something similar. I've been on many of their websites, and most of them have some kind of like a calculator or laying out of costs for attendance. And so would encourage you to do this exercise for everywhere that you're looking at, and to think about this is one of the many things that people need to take into account when they're looking at divinity school, graduate school, seminary. Just knowing that the education is a lot more than just the financial piece, but we're specifically concerned about setting everyone up well for them to be able to go to get this graduate theological education and be able to pay back any loans they may have taken out upon graduation. Anything else the rest of you would add?
I would add Yeah, I would just echo and support your points about working. So definitely think of this as a degree that will allow you to work. I would say starting out at the beginning, maybe your first semester, get the feel of graduate level reading and all that goodness, and maybe work less hours, like in the 10 hour, kind of 10 to 12-hour range. But know that you'll be able to add more to that. I know people across cohorts, and everyone that I know kind of works 15 to sort of the 25-hour. So it's very possible to work a little more than part-time, and none of us are drowning. So I'm happy to kind of elaborate on that as folks would like, or even talk one-on-one, but you can work.
All right, I just put our admissions email address up and into the chat. So if you'd like to take Courtney up on her invitation or speak with another student, we're able to connect you with some good folks both in our office and beyond. And then you can also email that same address to speak with either me or with Angela. We're very happy to talk with you about your financial There are my dogs. About your financial planning for Divinity School, and to offer whatever assistance we're able to do. And you should also check out the website. So under the financial aid and the scholarship area, there's a list of a link to a link of external awards, and definitely check out applying for some of those external awards. They're grouped kind of topically. So some of them are related to if you have a specific religious affiliation, or if you are planning on doing ministry within a particular racial minority group. Or just general funding opportunities. So you should absolutely check those out. Something else to know is that once you actually decide that you're going to come to the program, then you'll have access to actually start looking for jobs. Fall jobs have not been posted yet, so sorry, but they will be posted on a specific Vanderbilt website. And I know that folks here have some connections in the Nashville area. And so we can also think about like some other areas of the city that you can look to apply for work. We know people. We'll do our best to try to connect you. I am not seeing any other questions. Any last words of wisdom from the two of you to anyone else?
I would just say don't be afraid to ask, right? If you know a group that would benefit from your education, or you are a part of something where you volunteer, or you are a part of a church, whether it's denominationally affiliated or not, oftentimes places and organizations will have scholarship funds or educational funds, or at the very least, they're willing uh, um, to take up a collection or to do something where it helps offset what your expenses will be. And don't take that for granted. People don't they don't know unless you ask, right? So if they know there's a need, I have found people more often than not willing to try to help meet that need, especially in the kinds of work that folks do. Whether it's in organizing, whether it's in public service, whether it's in nonprofit, whether it's in higher ed, whether it's in congregational ministry, there are places and people and things in place that are set up to help, and you have to ask often if it's not well publicized. So don't hesitate. The other thing that I would say is, if there are skills that you have honed, learned, been to college and gotten a degree for, whatever the case may be, if it's budgeting, if it's advertisement, if it's teaching, if you have a particular skill, there's always need for that, for those skills, in lots of different places. Can you do that work contractually? Can you, if you go and teach and do a series because you have particular expertise around a certain poetry with a local library first or something, will they send your honoraria as a stipend or a scholarship as opposed to paying you directly? There are all kinds of ways to pay for your theological education. You often just have to think and be creative about ways that you can find the money or to use the resources that you've been given to use it towards your theological education. So those are sorts of just the reflections. I'm happy to have that conversation with folks about how you can be imaginative and think through the possibilities if folks would be interested in that in a one-on-one. So just think through what the possibilities are and don't be afraid to ask.
There are quite a few possibilities for federal work study across campus. I think that's the advantage of being part of a lot wider university. So sometimes, like, there's one Div student who works in the School of Biomedical, blah, blah. I don't know what it is. So it's, everybody comes in with really different levels of expertise. And then there are positions available. We've had folks, Courtney also works as a research assistant for a faculty member. There is another student who used to work with us who worked at the graduate school and was able to even do some travel for his job with them. So there's a lot of possibilities, both federal work study and just like general jobs that are at the university that are not necessarily federal work study. So don't be shy in terms of checking those out as well. We want to thank you for joining us, and thanks to Angela for presenting despite the gifts of 2 dogs making themselves known. And Courtney, of course, thank you so much for being hospitable and sharing your wisdom as well. We look forward to seeing as many as possible of you at some point. Hopefully you can join us here, but if not, I hope that you can take this information and make it useful for you wherever you end up. So thank you, everyone.